we kind of relate estrogen and those sex hormones to reproductive health, but actually they are so important for lots of different things. And one of those things is peristalsis, which is this kind of movement of food through your gastrointestinal tract.
Yeah.
So when your hormones kind of slow down, actually your gut motility slows down as well.
Hello and welcome to Women and Wellbeing with me, Natalie Anderson. In today's episode, we are talking the importance of nutrition for midlife wellness with menopause nutritionist and author Emma Bardwell. So sit back, relax, and get ready to join us in our conversation.
Women were coming to me and just saying, I'm so overwhelmed. There's all this conflicting information on social media. I am, I've got somebody in the supermarket shouting about vegetables being toxic.
Yeah.
I don't know where to turn. I'm really overwhelmed and confused by all this kind of misinfo, or this pseudoscience and these kind of conflicting messages. So they were like, just tell me what to eat. And so actually the book is a response to that lament, I guess.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make it really, really clear.
Hello all, I hope you're all well. Now today I am thrilled to be joined by a former visitor to our podcast who's back again to share her insight on how food and nutrition can impact us in perimenopause and menopause. As a registered nutritionist with her own clinic, she is blending nutritional science, diet therapy and behaviour change to empower women to feel their best in midlife, helping them unlock the key to a happier, more energised second half. I'm so excited that she's back with us today because I've got a lot of questions for her. She is the brilliant Emma Bardwell. Hi, Emma.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's so lovely to see you again and in real life this time.
I know.
It was back in the pandemic days when we had our first chat and we talked about your brilliant book, The Perimenopause Solution, which was an absolute game changer for me. So thank you so much.
I'm so happy to hear that.
It really honestly helped me with everything because a few years ago, obviously, we weren't having this conversation that we're having now. But today we're going to talk about your new book, The 30 gram plan.
It's right there.
It's right there. But before we get onto that, I just want to go back to kind of the beginning with you about your own journey and where your interest in nutrition came from, and what were those early symptoms for you?
Yeah, so in terms of nutrition, actually, in a former life, I worked in advertising, and I actually changed career in my early 40s. Which is kind of testament to the fact that, you can take a different path in midlife.
Yeah.
So I've been doing nutrition now for I'm 53, so 13 years. And in terms of the reason why I decided to niche in menopause particularly, it was because I was going through such kind of debilitating symptoms myself, but not getting the help that I needed. So I saw that there was this huge kind of chasm, really, between what women wanted and needed and the education that they were kind of seeking out and what they were actually getting.
And in terms of then building your clinic and, like you said, specialising in midlife and menopause and perimenopause, we have opened up the conversation massively now compared to, like you say, where you were 10, 13 years ago. But what would you say that the main concerns that you see in your clinic are?
Yeah, that's a great question. They are widespread. So we know that there are at least, 34, I would say probably more like double that in terms of symptoms when it comes to perimenopause and menopause. But in terms of the things that people really, come to see me about, it tends to be changes in body composition. So they're worried about weight gain, usually. They are worried about anxiety, sleep. It tends to be the aesthetics.
Yeah.
So, hair, skin changes, things like that. I kind of wish, actually, that women came to see me more for the metabolic changes that we know happen around this time. But I think probably those aren't really talked about enough.
For me, I feel like it's all kind of interlinked because that also affects your energy. If you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see, then that gives you kind of a negative version of yourself, which then makes you feel flat. It makes you feel sad. And whereas when you're feeling like, it's like when you go on holiday and you eat amazing food and you drink loads of water, you come back and you feel amazing and energized. And when you were talking before about the body composition, because it's the middle spread. It's around the waist where I think most women feel or start to feel uncomfortable. And can you just explain to me why that is, why it's that area?
Yeah, unfortunately, what happens when you start to lose estrogen and progesterone, but usually more estrogen, you tend to start to carry your weight a little bit differently. So, pre-menopause, you would probably carry it. Typically, women carry it on their boobs, their bum, their hips. But post-menopause or during that kind of menopause transition, we then tend to carry it around our midsection, unfortunately. So we kind of become less hourglass shaped and much more kind of apple shaped. Almost, It's kind of androgenic. It's almost a little bit more kind of male-like.
Yeah, because I think I'm finding in this perimenopause phase that I never was conscious of my legs, and I'm not complaining in any way, but I've definitely noticed that I'm holding more kind of weight around my legs than I ever did before. And I'm like, I wonder where that comes from and how to not combat it, because I don't want to put a negative spin on it, but kind of, do you know what I mean? I'm just wondering what that's about.
I totally know what you mean. So I think it's obviously a really complex issue. I think there isn't enough research. Obviously, there's not enough research done on women's health, full stop, right? Yeah. Exactly. But there needs to be more research done. I think it's a kind of snowball effect. I think there's a lot of things happening at this time. We tend to become a little bit more insulin resistant.
Right.
We start to lose muscle mass.
Yeah.
We know that muscle is metabolically active, so it actually burns, not a huge amount, but it burns calories to a degree. We start to sleep worse. Our ghrelin and our kind of our appetite signals, they change. And so I think it's this kind of, it's just what's the word? It's like a kind of snowball effect.
Yeah.
And I think it all kind of adds up. Little by little, it kind of creeps up. And then suddenly you are like, oh my God, my body has changed completely.
Yeah. And I think now you've said it like that. And I remember you specifically saying when we last chatted about it being insidious, like this insidious thing that kind of happens. And I suppose the purpose for me of this podcast is to give women that education early doors so that we can start to look out for things. And you mentioned there about our resistance to insulin, or the fact that I would say as well, sugar cravings. Would you say that if you're starting to notice that and you're kind of in your early 40s, that's probably a perimenopause sign?
I think it definitely could be. We know that even when you're cycling regularly, we know that just before your period, when your estrogen levels are low, you can often feel a lot hungrier. And there is some studies kind of showing that your appetite increases up to 300 to 500 calories a day just before your period.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that when you start to lose those hormones during menopause, that then, you may well start to feel hungrier. But, just going back to what I said before about, not sleeping very well, we know that when we are tired, we are much hungrier. Your body's kind of seeking out energy, isn't it? And again, it's 300 to 500 calories the day after a poor night's sleep and the day after that. And so I think all of these things, maybe not moving quite so much, not running around after kids. If you've got kids, we are a little bit more, or maybe a lot more sedentary, I think, than we actually realise. There's pelvic floor issues, so I think women perhaps aren't so inclined to exercise as much as they were. So, there's a lot going on, isn't there?
There is a lot going on. And I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed for a lot of women, ovulation has become a bigger factor for me now than it was 10, 15 years ago, and definitely my digestive system and how things are linked to that. And I know I've spoken to quite a few of my friends, and they say, they're finding that having a sluggish digestive system is making them feel bloated. And because of that, we feel, again, uncomfortable. So we don't want to exercise, and we don't want to move, and we don't want to do anything. So can you kind of help me out with that?
Yeah. So again, it's down to hormones. And if you're cycling regularly, just before your period, often women start to hold on to water, don't they? They may well find that they are a lot more bloated. And again, it's that dip. And so when we are in menopause, in that transition, and our hormones are dipping, again, your your digestion tends to kind of slow down a bit. We kind of relate estrogen and those sex hormones to reproductive health, but actually they are so important for lots of different things. And one of those things is peristalsis, which is this kind of movement of food through your gastrointestinal tract.
Yeah.
So when your hormones kind of slow down, actually your gut motility slows down as well. So it's interesting, you know, again, it's complicated, isn't it? But there are lots of things that you can do, and I'm sure we can go into them.
I was going to say, so help us out. Like, what can we do for this?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing, and this kind of relates to my book, is to make sure that you are hydrating really well. I mean, it's such a simple thing, but I would say 8 out of 10 women who I talk to in my clinic when they come to see me, they aren't, you know, it's such a simple thing. They're just not drinking enough water. Yeah. You need water to keep all of that, food moving through your system. We need fibre. We need 30 grams a day. Hence the name of my book, 30-gram plan. Yes. But at the moment, you know, in the UK, we're getting around 16 to 18 grams a day. In the US, it's even less.
Yeah.
So we are woefully kind of under-eating when it comes to fibre. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons why. Probably the main one is that when people try to include more fibre in their diet, actually it can make them, ironically, a bit more bloated and gassy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So then it puts people off actually trying to kind of incorporate it more into their diets. So it's kind of like a catch-22.
And would you ever recommend things like supplements to help and to aid digestion? Because again, I think when you feel clear inside, you feel more, you just feel more energized. Yeah. You feel so much better in yourself. So what other things could we look to?
Yeah, I think as well, just on that point, when everything's moving through you really nicely, you feel like you've got a bit more confidence.
Yeah.
So the things that you can do are obviously is more fruit, veg, keep the skin on, you know, simple things, nuts, seeds, legumes. But I think what I'm trying to kind of get through to women is they don't have to overhaul their diets. They don't overnight.
Yes.
They don't suddenly want to go from 14 grams of fibre a day to 30 grams.
Yeah.
So in the book, I talk about kind of incrementally increasing it bit by bit. When it comes to fibre, we always say go low and go slow. A tablespoon of legumes, for example, do that for a week, 2 weeks, and then start to build up. But I think movement after meals is really helpful.
Right.
I think also, you know, there are supplements. In the UK, there's a great one actually called Myota, which is non-fermentable. So it means that you don't get that kind of gassiness and that bloating afterwards.
Yeah.
And you literally just put a tablespoon in like a tiny shot of water. It tastes a little bit chalky, but it doesn't really have a massive taste. And honestly, it helps with everything. It helps to bulk up your poo, and it helps to actually push it through as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I know, like, for some people,
there.
I think we should go there because people are really frightened to talk about these things. But equally, it's the things that really matter. And, you know, for our health, you know, for our health and well-being, if we don't have these conversations, people feel embarrassed about it. And it's important because actually that's where we can actually start to make ourselves feel better. And, you know, as I said right at the beginning, you're helping women, you're empowering women by helping them take control of their own health and well-being through the book and through, you know, obviously the perimenopause solution as well. Just going back to protein, so how important protein can be as you get towards midlife as well. Well, even before that, but even definitely in midlife. Yeah. You know, let's talk about that. Yeah.
Protein, obviously important throughout, but it really does kind of, your needs actually ramp up around midlife. So we start to digest it slightly less efficiently.
Right.
Therefore, you need to kind of include more. We also, as we've touched on already, we start to lose muscle mass.
Yeah.
And so resistance training coupled with an increased protein intake is really, really important. Also, a lot of us are perhaps experiencing more illness around this time. So again, you need it for recovery. So there's lots of kind of numbers that are bandied around. We're kind of talking, you know, not excessive amounts here, because what happens is if you eat too much protein, it's actually incredibly filling. So it's brilliant for weight loss.
Yeah.
But what happens is that then it can displace other, really important nutrients because you're so full on the protein that maybe you don't want so much, fruit and veg and things like that. So it's really important to kind of keep it all in balance. So in the book, I talk about 30 grams. But again, you don't have to do that overnight. You can build up slowly. If you want some other kind of numbers or even just kind of making it a little bit simpler, perhaps, thinking about the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
So or like a deck of cards. So that size amount of protein with every single meal, if you can, is a brilliant way to start.
And in terms of like the book itself, going back to this, what was it that you thought actually there's a hole here or something that's missing and I want to address it?
Well, so that's such a great question. Women were coming to me and just saying, I'm so overwhelmed. There's all this conflicting information on social media. I am, I've got somebody in the supermarket shouting about vegetables being toxic.
Yeah.
I don't know where to turn. I'm really overwhelmed and confused by all this kind of misinfo, or this pseudoscience and these kind of conflicting messages. So they were like, just tell me what to eat. And so actually the book is a response to that lament, I guess.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make it really, really clear and kind of spell it out for people. So it's actually aimed at men and women, but there's meal plans in there. It's very, very simple. There's nothing remotely kind of difficult about the recipes.
Again, going back to then like the construction of a plate. So what should we be looking at? Is it 30-30? What is your reaction to like carbohydrates? Should we keep that small or do you apply the same rule?
Yeah. So I tell people ideally to build their plates around protein and fibre. So half your plate, we're looking at kind of salad-y type ingredients, fruit and veg, those kind of things. A quarter protein, some healthy fats in there, really important, incredibly important for skin health, for hormones. Your hormones are actually made from fats. And in terms of the carbohydrates, I think we are really scared of carbs, aren't we?
Yeah, that's kind of why I'm asking you, because I know that so many people are like, I can't have this and I can't have that. And I know especially moving into midlife, loads of my friends have stopped eating bread and they've stopped having like even potatoes. And I'm like, I'm not sure whether that's the right thing. I mean, you helped me out with that. Yeah,
it's such a shame because I think what's happening is people kind of conflate carbs with things like pastries and cakes and donuts. But actually, when we're talking about carbs, obviously, we are talking about a whole different beast here. We're talking about whole grains.
Yeah.
We're talking about whole grain bread. We're talking about whole wheat pasta. We're talking about brown rice, things like that. So it's about quality of your carbohydrates.
Right.
Really important when women are struggling with, fatigue and lethargy. It's really important, actually, to be getting plenty of carbohydrates in your diet, simply for that energy, particularly if you're exercising and things like that. But again, it's about quality, but it's also about quantity. So again, we don't want to be displacing other, ingredients in your diet. So, I mean, it's such a boring message. And this is why it doesn't, it's not clickbaity.
Yeah.
It's about balance.
Yeah,
right?
It is about balance. But again, we should fight back against the clickbait and try and obviously, help people, because going straight to clickbait, obviously we've seen this rampant rise of the weight loss jabs. And, especially for women in midlife who are really struggling, and that's the thing that they only feel like they can turn to. I mean, it's quite a contentious subject, but can we look at our nutrition as a way of kind of combating that and saying, look, you don't have to do that if you just follow these simple recipes, rules? What do you think? What's your take on that?
So first off, I think with the GLP-1s, I think there obviously is a need for them in a certain population, but I do think that they are being misused hugely. I mean, we probably both know people who are on them who don't need to be,
who
right?
are microdosing and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, they're not without their side effects. And I think there is this kind of movement actually towards being as thin and as skinny as possible without actually feeling strong.
Yeah.
And without actually feeling, thinking about what's going on inside. So what happens is if you lose weight too quickly, you start to lose muscle.
Yeah.
And I've talked about it a lot because it's so important. We need muscle. It's like a longevity organ.
Yeah.
We need it, as much of it as we can, in order to keep, I talk about keeping life in our years, not just years in our life.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about health span here, not just lifespan.
Yeah.
And muscle is incredibly important for that. It's important for posture, for balance. It actually acts as a kind of reservoir for glucose. So, lots of people are really kind of on these... there's this real kind of movement towards glucose monitors, isn't there?
Yeah.
Rather than spending loads of money on those, which really aren't that helpful if you don't have type 2 diabetes or diabetes, actually, building up your lean muscle is a brilliant way because it acts like this sponge, like a reservoir, and it sucks up the glucose when you consume it. So it's a really good way of kind of regulating your blood glucose.
And I think people are so scared, though, aren't they, of like... when you talk about protein and working out, they're frightened. As you say, we've gone back to this idea of kind of shrinking ourselves down and being very, very thin again, as opposed to strong and healthy. And again, going back to the idea of, working out and lifting weights, especially in midlife, it's really important. But there's a lot of people kind of turning away from it again because they just want to be small. And I think it's the wrong message.
Absolutely. It's bonkers, isn't it? I think there is nothing more, lots of women talk about, and you touched on it at the top, about feeling like you've kind of just lost your confidence, you've lost your self-esteem, you are kind of shrinking, you're becoming more invisible. Actually, what we want at this time of life is to feel really seen and to kind of fill our space and to feel kind of really empowered. And I think lifting weights is a brilliant way to do that. It makes you feel really strong and seen and kind of like you're owning your space. So that alongside protein, I think is a brilliant kind of, what's the word? They work cohesively.
Yeah, they work and they're in balance with each other. And I think, again, that's really important about that message of being strong and vibrant and energetic in midlife, rather than it being this like terrifying next chapter, it being actually like really exciting next chapter. And I had a conversation with another business owner who said, women in their 40s plus kind of have all this creativity because they've gone through all this like experimental phase of, well, that didn't work and that didn't work. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, actually, I do know what works. Now we just need the energy and the power to kind of bring it to fruition.
Oh my God, yeah. It's such a creative time, I think.
Yeah.
I think, you've been around the block, you know yourself, you've got a brilliant sense of kind of intuition at this time. And you might not be, I often say women might not be fertile reproductively now, but they are fertile in so many different ways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the idea that actually you're going to spend more of your life not in those reproductive years. The majority of your life, hopefully, like you say, if you're looking at health span and lifespan, is actually not playing those roles maybe of mother or or being linked to that side of things. So you've got all this huge new side of life to challenge, to create businesses, to be vibrant. And going back to the book, I think, what's amazing is, like you said, you've put all these recipes in there. And that's what I love as well with your Instagram. Your Instagram is literally like heaven. It's like food heaven. You go and you spend half an hour on your Instagram going, I'm going to make that and I'm going to make that. And I mean, how do you come up with all of these incredible recipes and make them look so vibrant?
Oh, thank you. They don't always look vibrant.
Well, I think they do.
I only post the good-looking ones.
Ah, that's what it is.
I think the key, though, is to keep it simple.
Right.
Really, really simple. There's nothing remotely complicated about any of my recipes. They can all be meal prepped, most of them meal prepped, or batch cooked. I think, if somebody's like, look, where the hell do I just start? Keep it really simple.
Yeah.
Choose one or two things that work for you. For example, overnight oats.
Yes.
I live and die by these because I think they are just so versatile. But they pack in a lot of nutrition and a lot of protein and a lot of fibre.
Yeah.
But you can change up the toppings so easily to keep them really fresh.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier as well about the role of fats for our hormone balance, because you do have some fantastic recipes that you have nuts and avocados and beautiful, like I said, recipes there. But again, there's a lot of women frightened when they say the word fat, and they're like, oh no, I don't want to touch that. But it's so vital, isn't it, for our hormonal health?
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, it helps to fill you up. So, in actual fact, by including some fats, actually, you may well find that you don't eat so much across the day.
Yeah. So in terms of like the fats, and I know we know kind of some of the healthy fats, like your nuts and again your avocados, but is there anything else that we should look at?
Yeah, so I would say to make, in terms of your main cooking oil, I would say to make that olive oil or extra virgin olive oil. It's really good for lots of different reasons. It's anti-inflammatory. It's got lots of polyphenols in it. It tastes great. It can be a little bit expensive, but here in the UK, we've got these budget supermarkets, and actually they do a really good line in extra virgin olive oil. Buy it in a dark glass container if possible, because it really helps to kind of preserve it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Try to avoid plastic containers if possible,
just
because they let the light in and it can oxidize. But yeah, nut seeds, oily fish, we haven't touched on that. A really good source of omega-3. Lots of people aren't consuming those kind of 2 portions a week. I include myself in that sometimes. So sometimes, we haven't really talked about supplements, but just kind of dipping our kind of toe in the supplement chat, I think an omega-3 fish oil can be really helpful.
Right.
Or an algae oil if somebody is vegan.
Yeah. Sometimes it can feel expensive. And when we're living in the cost of living crisis that we're in right now, how do you challenge that? How do you kind of go about making sure you're getting all these amazing ingredients, but that it's within your budget?
Those budget supermarkets that I mentioned, I think are great. I mean, I won't mention the brands, but, I think it's quite obvious if you live in the UK which ones they are. There's 2. And you can buy in bulk. They do a brilliant line in things like seeds, chia seeds. You can buy massive bags of them. So that would be the thing that I would say. And don't be frightened to buy frozen stuff.
I was just about to ask you. That's exactly what I was about to ask you then. I was like, if you're thinking about frozen salmon portions, which are way cheaper than like the ones that when you're getting them that's fresh, are they as good?
Absolutely. So they are, everything is locked in at source. So the nutrients are locked in, particularly when it comes to things like fruit and veg. But yeah, absolutely. They are a great tool to have in your tool belt. And they are, obviously, it means less waste as well. We've got to do what we can. We're not talking about being perfect here. We don't have to. Everything doesn't have to be organic. And grass fed and all of that. There's quite a big kind of elitist conversation going on at the moment. Make it work for you. Do what you can do.
I think that is so important, because I do think that's what puts a lot of people off. I think lots of people really want to take care of their health and they really want to eat better, but it just feels so expensive. So knowing things like, buying in bulk and buying frozen, and you are still going to get those great ingredients, those healthy fats. I just need to ask you this question. This is just for me, because I love butter.
Oh, yeah.
So
me too.
Butter is a better alternative to like margarine and things, is it? This is literally just for me.
I can't believe you're dropping this in at the end, because this is such a big and nuanced discussion. But yes, it probably is better than margarine, because margarine has kind of hydrogenated oils in it. So yeah, it is. But I wouldn't make it your main kind of fat that you cook with, particularly, because it is high in saturated fat. This is a huge conversation, and again, very kind of nuanced. But we do need to be thinking about butter.
Well, that's kind of really helpful to know, because I think, again, the mixed messaging that we get from everywhere, it's like, oh, butter's better for you, so and it's a better fat for you, and you're like, is it? It was just so confusing.
It's so
but
confusing.
That's what's brilliant about, again, your book. Your book is the fact that if we listen to your book and we take your advice, you've written it all down for us so that we can feel better, we can feel more energized. Before we do have to wrap up, because I have been given the nod to wrap up, but just for you personally, what are the well-being products or practices that you actually really swear by?
Well, this is kind of loops in with what we've been talking about. Curate your social media feed. Cull all the people who are talking in blanket terms and who are kind of making you feel fearful about certain foods.
Right.
That's a big one. For me personally, I need my own space. I really need me time now that I'm kind of coming out of that menopause transition. I'd say that I'm kind of almost postmenopausal now. But yeah, I really enjoy my own company. I really need time. I go to the theatre on my own. Sounds
I love
really sad,
that.
doesn't
No,
it?
it doesn't. I love that.
Love it. Just, going to the cinema even. I am yet to go to the pub or a restaurant on my own, but, I'm gearing up to it.
Yeah.
But I just need that kind of time to recalibrate. So even if it's just, having a bath, shutting the door, keeping the kids out, and just having that time to kind of decompress after a busy day, because we are all juggling so much, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, it'll be solo holidays next. Yeah, that'll be it.
Maybe.
Honestly, I love that. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming to chat to me today. Honestly, it's been amazing. And I know there's so much more that we could talk about, like loads more. So we'll have to have you back again at some point. Yes, sadly, we've run out of time for today. The 30-gram plan is out now and available to shop online and in all good bookshops. If you'd like to follow Emma on Instagram, where you can pick up her amazing recipes and even more helpful advice, you can find her at emma.bardwell. For more women's health and lifestyle, you can visit us at our website, thecapsule.co.uk. You can also catch up with our previous podcast episodes by visiting the podcast page and subscribing to any of our podcast channels and YouTube. Please feel free to keep leaving your rates and reviews. I love, love, love hearing from you. Thank you so much for so many of your amazing messages. You can also drop us a message at our Instagram at @officialcapsule if you'd like to put any questions to our future guests or leave a message about any of our current episodes. As always, I will be back next week with another very special guest, but today all that's left for us to say is goodbye. So it's goodbye from Emma. Bye-bye. And goodbye from me. Bye-bye.